The streets of Paris were silent, but not peaceful. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every corner a threat. Posters of Hitler stared down from the walls, their cold eyes a constant reminder that freedom had become a memory. Fear was a currency here. Every whispered conversation, every glance over the shoulder could mean death. The Gestapo moved like ghosts, their presence invisible until it was too late. Amid this darkness, a group of women wove through the city with a courage few could imagine. Ordinary and appearance teachers, secretaries, nurses, but carrying extraordinary burdens. They were spies, and their mission was nothing short of monumental: to uncover Germany's most guarded secret. The V-2 rocket program, a weapon capable of changing the course of the war. Every step was a gamble. Every errand could be a trap. Yet, they moved with precision, their lives balanced on the razor's edge of discovery. One young spy, barely more than a girl, clutched a folder of blueprints against her chest, heart hammering. Behind her, the patter of boots on cobblestones grew closer. The Gestapo were near. She turned sharply, ducking into a narrow alley, hiding behind a stack of crates. One misstep, one cough, and it would be over, but she made it. Breath ragged, palms trembling, she pressed the folder to her chest. Inside were the details that could save thousands of Allied lives or doom her if caught. In that fleeting moment of survival, she felt both the weight of history and the peril of the present. In the shadows of Europe, heroes were not men with medals. They were women who moved unseen, who risked everything, and who dared to challenge a regime that promised death for disobedience, and their story was just beginning. By late 1943, the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, had begun quietly seeking women for a mission that few could imagine. Ordinary faces, ordinary lives, but beneath the surface, extraordinary courage. Among them were women like Violet Chabot, fierce and unyielding, and Noor Inayat Khan, quiet yet resolute, their names soon to be whispered in secret corridors of power. They were daughters, wives, mothers, and spies who would walk the razor's edge of danger. The recruitment was not glamorous. Letters arrived in nondescript envelopes, instructions to report to shadowed offices where whispered conversations and coded messages replaced ordinary introductions. At training facilities hidden deep in the English countryside, the women endured hours of grueling preparation. They learned sabotage, wireless communication, and the art of moving unseen. They practiced loading pistols, memorizing codes, and vanishing into the night without a trace. The instructors spoke little of the consequences. The message was clear: discovery meant death. For these women, the greatest challenge was not skill, but choice. Leaving family behind, their mothers, fathers, siblings, even young children, was a weight that pressed heavily on their hearts. Yet, each knew that the lives of thousands might depend on their courage. And so, with trembling hands and steady resolve, they crossed the threshold into the unknown. Their first missions were deceptively small, shadowing trucks, noting factory schedules, slipping messages between contacts in quiet towns where every neighbor might be a spy. Each step carried a terrifying tension. Eyes followed them. Footsteps echoed behind them in narrow streets. One misstep could unravel everything. A casual question, an overheard word, could expose them to the Gestapo, whose reach was swift and merciless. Yet, in the silence of the night, the women thrived. They learned to blend in, to speak with conviction, to move without hesitation. Each mission, no matter how small, honed their instincts. They became shadows themselves, unseen, untraceable, but always watching, and as they sent their first coded messages back to London, a spark of triumph mingled with fear. Every transmission carried secrets of unimaginable value: the blueprints, the plans, the lifeblood of a weapon that could terrorize Europe. These women were no longer ordinary. They were the hidden eyes and ears of the Allied war effort, and their courage would soon be tested in ways they could never have imagined. Autumn of 1943, Europe was a continent under a shadow. And for the women of the SO, the shadow had become home. Crossing the Channel in the dead of night, they landed on foreign soil with nothing but false papers, hidden weapons, and a mission so perilous it could not be spoken aloud. They were ghosts in their own right, tasked with infiltrating Nazi-controlled territories to uncover the secret heart of Hitler's ultimate weapon, the V-2 rocket program. The cities they entered were deceptively ordinary. Streets lined with shops and cafes masked the silent vigilance of the Gestapo, whose presence was everywhere and nowhere. Every glance from a passerby could be a threat. Every uniformed officer patrolling the sidewalks was a potential executioner. And yet these women moved among them, blending seamlessly. Their courage a fragile shield against discovery. One of the spies, a young woman barely 25, walked the cobblestone streets of Peenemünde, the heart of the rocket program. She carried in her bag sketches of rocket schematics and coded notes. The slightest tremor in her hand could betray her. As she entered a small cafe, a Gestapo officer's eyes met hers, sharp and calculating. She forced a smile, ordering a coffee in the local dialect she had practiced for weeks. Every word was a gamble, every gesture a test of her nerve. When the officer finally moved on, her chest heaved, and she pressed the papers closer to her chest. Their ingenuity was their lifeline. Messages were encoded in seemingly innocuous letters to London. Dead drops were hidden in hollow bricks, garden sheds, and flower pots. A piece of chocolate could conceal a microfilm, a book could hold the plans of a factory. They became masters of disguise maids, secretaries, even couriers of ordinary goods, anything to move unseen while gathering intelligence that could change the tide of the war. Yet, for all their skill, the work came with a personal cost. The isolation was crushing. In towns where no one could be trusted, where every neighbor might be a spy, they were alone in a crowd. Letters from home were rare, smuggled through convoluted channels. Every night, fear wrapped around them like a second skin, keeping them alert but leaving exhaustion and loneliness in its wake. The moral dilemmas were relentless. One evening, a small boy approached a spy on her way to a dead drop, curious and wide-eyed. She had to lie, to deflect, to treat him like a stranger. Each small deception weighed heavily. Every lie could save a life, but it chipped away at her humanity. She wondered sometimes whether surviving these missions was worth the cost to her soul. Gestapo raids were unpredictable and brutal. Factories producing components for the V-2 rockets were heavily guarded. Guards would stop, question, and sometimes search anyone nearby. One night, the spy slipped into a factory courtyard to photograph a launch assembly. A guard's flashlight cut across the yard, slicing through the darkness like a knife. She froze, the camera pressed to her chest. Every second felt like an eternity. The guard moved on, and she exhaled silently, knowing how close she had come to capture, torture, and death. The stakes rose with each passing day. Every successful mission revealed more about the V-2 rockets, the fuel mixtures, the launch sites, the production schedules. The intelligence they gathered was priceless, a map of destruction that could not fall into the wrong hands. Yet, with each victory, the risk intensified. German counterintelligence was relentless, and rumors of captured spies and sudden disappearances haunted them. Even small towns became arenas of tension. Every cafe, every marketplace, every train station was a potential trap. A casual conversation could reveal too much. A glance at the wrong uniform could trigger suspicion. Yet, amidst the fear, these women found moments of quiet determination. They learned to trust their instincts, to move like shadows, to strike quickly, and vanish just as suddenly, and through it all, the personal toll became undeniable. Nights were sleepless, filled with visions of captured comrades, families waiting in far-off countries, and the constant awareness that discovery meant a certain death. Their nerves frayed, their bodies ached, but the mission pressed on. Courage was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. An instinct honed under the most extreme conditions. By the time reports made it back to London. The women had uncovered secrets of the V-2 program that the Allies had only speculated about. The locations, the schematics, the launch timetables, all in their hands, gathered through peril, patience, and unmatched bravery. But each mission left them emptier, more alone, and more aware that they were playing a game with no margin for error. In the shadows of Nazi Europe, These women moved unseen, risking everything for the chance to prevent mass destruction. Their work was dangerous, isolating, and morally complex, but it was vital. And though the enemy had no idea who these silent predators were, the women knew the truth. One mistake could end everything. As they prepared for their next mission, the weight of what they carried was heavier than ever. Yet, in the darkness, there was a spark, an unyielding courage that would push them forward, into the heart of danger, into the very machinery of war itself. Winter of 1943 had settled across northern Europe, and the cold was more than just a physical burden. It was a cloak that concealed danger, but also amplified fear. The women spies had become shadows of themselves, moving silently through snow-dusted streets and dimly lit factories, their mission now more urgent than ever. Every day, the intelligence they gathered revealed horrifying details about Germany's secret weapon. The V-2 rockets. Reports from one spy indicated that production was not limited to a single location. Multiple sites dotted the countryside, each heavily guarded and isolated. She had memorized layouts, noted schedules of guards, and even counted the number of trucks transporting rocket components under cover of night. Another spy had tracked launch sites near the Baltic coast, sketching precise diagrams on scraps of paper that were carefully folded and hidden in the solace of her shoes. Each discovery was a revelation, but each carried unbearable risk, but danger was closing in faster than ever. A German counterintelligence officer, ruthless and meticulous, had begun to notice patterns. Reports of suspicious activity in small towns, unexplained delays in factories, and mysterious communications reached his desk. He moved quietly but decisively, sending patrols to shadow couriers, interrogating locals, and laying traps to flush out the spies. His presence was invisible, yet palpable, a shadow stalking the women as they carried intelligence that could save thousands. One night, a spy in Dresden received a coded message instructing her to photograph a newly assembled V-2 rocket. She navigated through narrow alleys, her breath visible in the freezing air, clutching a small camera concealed beneath her coat. A guard's flashlight swept across the street and she froze, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed danger, yet the mission demanded courage. With careful timing, she slipped behind a stack of crates, capturing the blueprint in a single, decisive click. It was a moment of triumph and a moment of pure terror. The stakes had never been higher. Exposure meant immediate arrest, brutal interrogation, and execution. But failure was not an option either. The intelligence they carried was crucial to the Allied war effort. Information about launch timetables, fuel calculations, and production bottlenecks could allow bombing raids to strike precisely where they would cripple the V-2 program. Every photograph, every coded note, every scrap of intelligence had the power to save or destroy lives. Their courage under pressure became a finely tuned instinct. One spy, confronted by an unexpected checkpoint in a small village, made a split-second decision. She tossed a bundle of decoy documents into the snow, smiling and explaining that she had been sent by a supplier. Her calm composure disguised the panic racing through her mind. Another spy, cornered by local informants suspicious of her movements, lied effortlessly about her identity, fabricating a story that could have been her own undoing if told imperfectly. In each case, their ability to improvise meant the difference between survival and death, but the moral weight was crushing. The spies carried secrets that could kill in more ways than one. Each photograph, each sketch, each coded message was a potential weapon in the wrong hands. And yet, to hesitate was unthinkable. Every night they wrestled with fear, guilt, and the knowledge that their own survival often depended on deception, sacrifice, and the calculated willingness to risk others' lives for the greater good. As intelligence flowed back to London, the Allies began to piece together the terrifying picture. The V-2 rockets were capable of striking cities with unprecedented speed and destruction. Without the women's courage and ingenuity, the program might have advanced unchecked, leaving Allied populations vulnerable to terror and devastation. Their bravery, invisible to the world, was now the thin thread holding back a storm. Then came the breakthrough. A spy discovered the coordinates of a key launch facility, a location previously unknown. But as she memorized the layout, she realized she was being followed. The counterintelligence officer had arrived, his presence undeniable now. Every choice mattered. A wrong step, a miscalculated turn could mean immediate capture. And yet she moved with precision, slipping into a narrow side street, letting the officer's shadow pass, and escaping into the darkness with the vital information intact. For a brief moment, the cold air seemed to still. She pressed the notes to her chest, heart racing, knowing that in a matter of hours the enemy would intensify the hunt. But in that heartbeat of survival, she felt the full weight of what they carried, the lives of countless civilians, the hopes of nations, and the fragile thread of a war effort that rested on their shoulders. In the frozen streets of Europe, these women became more than spies, they were lifelines. Ghosts and sentinels against annihilation. Every moment of bravery, every calculated risk, brought them closer to the truth of the V-2 program. Yet the danger was escalating. The counterintelligence officer would not relent, and the spies would be tested as never before. One misstep could unravel everything. And as the night deepened, the women pressed on, knowing the next mission might demand the ultimate sacrifice. Their courage had uncovered secrets that could kill, and the world would soon see just how much they were willing to risk to protect it. Spring of 1944 brought not warmth, but a sharper edge to the danger that had followed the women for months. The intelligence on the V-2 rockets, the locations, schematics, and launch schedules was now in their hands. But so was the growing attention of the Gestapo. German counterintelligence had pieced together enough patterns to tighten the net. Every mission, every step, every breath carried the weight of imminent capture. It began with a simple misstep. A guard noticed a shadow moving against the wall near a communications drop. In seconds, what had been a quiet town became a trap. Footsteps echoed on cobblestones. A door slammed. The women had no choice but to run. Papers, photographs, and coded messages pressed against their bodies. They could not let them fall into enemy hands. Failure was unthinkable. The chase was relentless. Through narrow alleys, across frozen canals, and over rooftops slick with rain, they ran. One spy stumbled but was caught by the hand of a comrade, pulled back into the shadows. Their breaths came in ragged bursts, hearts hammering like war drums. Behind them, the Gestapo closed in, shouting commands, the sound of boots pounding the cobblestones like the countdown to execution. Amid the chaos, split-second decisions became life or death. Coded messages were destroyed, some transmitted just in time via hidden wireless sets, their crackling signals reaching London with fragments of crucial intelligence. One spy climbed to a rooftop and sent the final coordinates of a rocket assembly site, praying the signal was strong enough. Below, Gestapo officers scanned the streets, unaware that the very information they hunted was already in Allied hands. Near misses punctuated the escape. A patrol car turned a corner just as they ducked behind a stack of crates. A neighbor's dog barked sharply, threatening to expose their hiding spot. Yet each obstacle was met with ingenuity, a dropped scarf to divert attention, a false trail of footprints, a sudden sprint into an abandoned building. The women had become experts in vanishing, almost as if they were dissolving into the night itself, but the triumph was bittersweet. Not all would survive. One spy, caught by an alert officer, was dragged into the shadows, her screams cut short by the cold certainty of Gestapo brutality. The others could only move on, hearts heavy, knowing their mission was successful, but that its cost was unbearably high. Every victory carried the sting of loss. Finally, under the cover of darkness, the surviving spies transmitted the last pieces of intelligence to London. The reports confirmed the production sites, the launch timetables, and the V-2 schematics. The Allies now had the information necessary to strike with precision, to disrupt the program, and to save countless lives. Triumph and relief were fleeting. The weight of what they had endured, and what they had lost pressed heavily upon them. In the quiet aftermath, the women paused in a hidden cellar, soaked, exhausted, and trembling. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with the memory of near death. One whispered a quiet prayer, another pressed a trembling hand to her chest, still feeling the echo of boots chasing her through narrow streets. They were alive, but they had seen the cost of courage firsthand, and yet, despite the fear, the loss, and the lingering terror, a spark of pride burned within them. They had faced unimaginable danger, outwitted ruthless officers, and protected the secrets that could change the course of the war. They were ghosts in enemy territory, unseen but decisive, their bravery a force far greater than any weapon. As dawn crept over the horizon, the women slipped away from the town, shadows among shadows, carrying with them the knowledge that the mission had succeeded, but also that the war had claimed some of their own. The streets, now quiet once more, seemed almost mournful, as if aware of the sacrifices made in the darkness. The escape had tested them to their limits. It had demanded every ounce of courage, every skill they had learned, and every instinct honed in the months of espionage. The success of the mission was undeniable, yet the personal cost was searing. Not every spy would see another sunrise, but the intelligence they had risked everything to deliver would change the course of history. In the shadows of occupied Europe, the women had become legends, not yet recognized, not yet celebrated, but immortal in their courage. Their high-stakes escape was a testament to the human will, the quiet heroism of the unseen, and the knowledge that even in the darkest night, courage could light the way. By mid-1944, the intelligence gathered by the women spies had begun to reshape the course of the war. Allied forces, armed with the detailed layouts of V-2 production sites and launch coordinates, struck with precision. Bombing raids destroyed factories that had churned out components of Hitler's most terrifying weapon. Launch pads were dismantled, supply lines cut, and the deadly rockets that had once promised devastation were delayed, weakened, and neutralized. The lives of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, were spared because these women had walked unseen through the shadows, risking everything to carry secrets that could end entire cities. Yet victory was not without sorrow. Some of the women who had risked their lives never returned. Their courage was measured not in medals or accolades, but in the silent acknowledgement of those who knew the truth, the missing faces, the letters that never arrived, the empty chairs at tables that should have been full. Each loss was a wound that would remain long after the war ended, a haunting reminder of the stakes they had faced. For the survivors, relief was mingled with grief. They knew their mission had succeeded, but the emotional toll lingered. The fear, the nights spent hiding from death, the friends lost to the Gestapo, all weighed heavily on them. And for decades their stories remained largely untold. The world celebrated victories and generals, but the quiet, extraordinary bravery of these women faded into obscurity, almost forgotten by history. Still, the impact of their courage endured. Without their ingenuity, their skill, and their relentless determination, the V-2 rocket program might have wrought unspeakable destruction. They had faced a machine built to terrify and kill, and yet, with nothing but their wits and unbreakable resolve, they had turned it into a target. Their heroism was silent yet profound. In the end, the legacy of these women was not written in the headlines of their time, but in the lives they saved, the missions they completed, and the inspiration they provided for generations to come. They were unsung heroes, shadows of courage who moved unseen, and whose impact was felt far beyond the darkness in which they operated. The war ended, but the shadows these women had walked in did not vanish immediately. Their streets, once patrolled by fear, returned to an uneasy normal. The cities and villages they had moved through bore little evidence of the invisible battles fought in alleys, cafes, and factories, and yet their impact was undeniable. Without their courage, the V-2 rockets might have wrought devastation on cities that now stood intact. Millions owed their lives to the quiet heroism of women whose names were barely spoken. For decades, recognition was scarce. The medals and accolades were slow to arrive. Official histories often overlooked the spies who had risked everything. Many of their stories remained buried in archives, hidden within pages of reports and coded transmissions. But gradually the truth began to emerge. Museums dedicated to wartime espionage, memorials in quiet corners of Europe, and historical accounts finally shed light on the extraordinary women who had operated in the shadows. Violet Shabo, Noor Inayat Khan, and countless others were celebrated. Their courage acknowledged, their sacrifices finally recognized, their bravery went beyond tactics and intelligence. They had faced near certain death, isolation, and the constant weight of fear, yet they pressed on. Each mission was a test of endurance, of skill, and of unyielding spirit. They became ghosts in the night, unseen but decisive, altering the course of the war without ever claiming the glory that came to others. Their legacy was one of resilience, ingenuity, and moral courage, a testament to what ordinary people can achieve in extraordinary circumstances. Imagine, for a moment, a quiet memorial. A simple plaque, a wreath of flowers, the names of women who dared to walk through fire without being consumed. Or a letter, faded and fragile, sent from a spy in hiding to London, its ink smudged from fear and tears. These small gestures echo the enormity of what they accomplished. A silent testament to the lives they saved and the sacrifices they made, their story is a reminder that heroism is not always visible, and that history often remembers only those who are seen. But courage does not require an audience. In the darkness of occupied Europe, these women moved unseen, carrying with them the hopes of nations and the fragile thread of survival for countless civilians. As we look back, it becomes clear their intelligence changed strategies, their bravery saved lives, and their sacrifices shaped the very outcome of the war. They were forgotten once in the official histories, but never again in memory. They are a legacy of courage, a lesson in selflessness, and an enduring symbol of what it means to stand against tyranny with nothing but conviction and resilience. In the quiet corners of history, they remain alive in the documents they preserved, the missions they completed, and the lives they saved. And as we honor them now, we remember that even in the darkest hours, ordinary people can achieve the extraordinary. Their shadows may have been hidden, but their impact is forever illuminated.